Well, hello world. Welcome to Raccoon Point Studios. I'm Sean Bombs. This is the AVM where we talk about audio, video, and music production. Welcome to part 6 of our series, 5 Essential Pedals for Beginner Guitar Players. Today we're going over reverb, and we have the Behringer DR600 digital reverb pedal. Before I go over the knobs and what they do, let's just talk about what reverb is. Reverb is an effect that tries to recreate what things sound like in a room, in a hall, in a big room, stadium, all the way to a small room. So it's just trying to give you the sound of dimension of something coming either from far away or something a little bit closer, but it just changes how we perceive the sound. And we can use that to have a natural room sound, or we can use that to have a out of this world type of sound. So before we had digital reverb, we had spring reverb and plate reverb. Spring reverb you can still find in combo tube amps to this very day. I have a spring reverb in my custom Fender Deluxe Reverb amp. And how that works is the signal comes through, it hits a physical metal spring, and then that vibrates and sends a signal to a transducer, and that goes out to your speaker, and then you have your spring reverb. And then the plate reverb is a very big metal plate. They're very heavy. You'll find them mostly in recording studios. It's not something that you would play at a show with. It'd be way too hard to move around. And that works the same way as a spring reverb, going into the plate, vibrating, going to a transducer, and then out a speaker. Fast forward to now where we have digital chips that will emulate these things. So let's go over the knobs, and what we have here is your level, and this is not a volume of your guitar. This is rather a mix knob for the effect blend. So if I go to the minimum, I'm going to play clean first. Then I'm going to put it on minimum. And you don't hear anything. And now let's put it on 12 o'clock. And you can hear that reverb. And then if I put it all the way up, you shouldn't hear my original sound. You might just hear all reverb. Okay, now we'll move on. We have a tone knob, and that's going to be the overall tonality of the reverb. I don't think it's going to change the actual guitar sound, but we can quickly find out. So it doesn't affect your direct signal. It only affects the reverb tail, okay? And so let's try this out. So this is going to make the reverb darker. And this is going to make it brighter. All right, so that is the tone knob, and let's move on to the time knob. And the time knob is going to be the amount of decay of the reverb. So minimum will be the shortest and maximum will be the longest. So let's try this on minimum. And it's a hall delay, so it's going to be long regardless. And now this is a hall delay with it maxed. So a little bit longer, not much longer. All right, so let's move on to the mode dial, and the mode dial is going to pick which type of reverb you are using. So you have spring, plate, hall, gate, room, and modulate. So the spring is going to emulate what we were talking about earlier, that physical spring that's found in a lot of combo amps to this very day. And then the plate, same thing, emulate the plates that were found in a lot of recording studios. And then hall is supposed to emulate what it would sound like if you're recording something in a big hall. Think of a church or something like that. And then you have the gated reverb, which is going to have a big reverb, but it's going to cut off. So it's going to, like a gate, slam the gate shut. So it's going to, when you're playing, the reverb comes on. When you stop playing, it shuts off, and you won't have that sustain. And it's an effect thing. They used it a lot for snare drums in recording studios in the 80s. People are starting to use them again. And then we have a room, and that's going to emulate what it would sound like to be in a medium-sized room and with a microphone further away from your amp. And then you have modulate, and that's going to pitch bend. And remember, we were talking about pitch modulation in our modulation video a few back. This is going to basically bend a little bit of the pitch in the note in the reverb. So you'll play something and it'll have a little bit of a bend. So let's go over some of these sounds, starting with the spring. I'm not really a fan of spring reverb. It's not ever been my thing. But I guess for this, I would make the tone to the darker side so you don't hear it as much, and maybe a shorter. So you can hear it's almost without it. With it. So that's spring reverb. Let's move on to the plate. And plates are usually a little warmer sounding. And by warmer, I mean darker, more lower, mid-range. And you can hear that actually. I mean, obviously I can change it with the tone knob. But I like to have my reverbs darker, so they're not accentuating my picks sound. Let's mess around with this time knob. So I like where it's at for what I was just playing, but just to give you an example of its max. And I'll show you without the reverb what I was playing. So as you can hear, without the reverb, it should sound like I'm right next to you. And with the reverb, it should sound like I'm further away from you. So that's basically what reverb is trying to create, is a space, a distance from the player to the listener. All right, so let's move on to Hall, and this should be a lot longer of a reverb. I'm going to turn it up. I'm going to turn that down. So when playing with reverb, I tend not to play palm muted, riffy kind of stuff. So it's not something I would do. You know, you don't hear it. So if I was, you wouldn't want to play that with that because it just washes out. You're not going to hear the rhythm. So it's more for slower. You could use it for slower passages like that to just give it that far away sound and just like a nice little pretty thing. And you could also use it for guitar solos. People do all the time. And then let's move on to the gate, which is interesting because it's not something I find that often on reverb pedals these days. And as you can hear, the reverb comes in as soon as I stop playing, it cut off. So I'm going to do it one more time. So let's try it shorter. Long, medium, bright, all the way up with the volume of the effect. So you're not really hearing the original guitar tone anymore. To make it sound not so harsh, let's turn that tone knob down. I actually like that kind of a sound. Let's bring the mix knob, or the level knob. They should really call that mix knob, but it's a level knob. It turns up the volume of the effect, but it also turns down the volume of your main signal. So for this effect, I prefer to not have my signal, my original guitar signal. And I would consider this not trying to sound like it's in a room, but more of an effect. Now let's move on to your room sound, which compared to the gate spring, back to the room. So you can hear how it's a shorter sound in the decay. I didn't touch anything else. I just changed what mode it was in, and it already had more of a natural room sound, where the spring doesn't sound like a room to me at all. I'm going to turn the tone knob all the way down. All right. And let's make it the shortest. So if you were really going for a room sound and you wanted to just add a little bit without it being over the top like I'm showing you in these examples, you would have this level down maybe to a quarter. See? So you hear the guitar a lot more than you hear the reverb, therefore it's not going to get in the way every time you play something. And that would be, you could use that more for rhythm stuff. If you wanted to have the sound of being in a room, but you still wanted the punch of your dry signal. So let's move on to modulation. And I'm going to turn the level all the way up so we can really hear that. I'm going to put the tone in the middle so we can really hear it without being too bright. So if you were with me for the modulation part of this series, you would probably think that sounds pretty similar to a chorus, and I think you'd be right. And that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like they're adding chorus to the reverb. So I'm going to play it again. I want you to hear it again. And it's subtle. It's not over the top, but compare that to this room. Back to the modulate. make it brighter, so maybe it'll be even more evident for any new guys, new girls. And I'm a big fan of modulated reverb. So if you follow me on here, subscribe, like, I will be doing videos on modulated reverbs. So let's have this at a quarter of the mix. With this pedal, I would say your best bet, if you get this pedal, would be to always have it pretty much between minimum and 12. So right around quarter of the way up. And that way you don't get too much of effect, but you get enough to hear it, and you can still play your rhythm stuff without it getting in the way. I would also probably want my tone knob a little bit less than 12. But it really depends on what you're playing. If you're playing dream pop, shoegaze, then you might want it to be everything all the way up. As you can hear, there's a variety of sounds you can get out of this digital reverb pedal by Behringer. Subscribe and like, because in the next series we're going to be comparing different styles of compressors, different styles of distortions and fuzzes, to different modulations, delay pedals, reverb pedals, and beyond. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.